Hello and welcome to Legal Basics with Sarah Law Global, and my name is Sian. So, still on the employment law series, today we're going to look at a topic that is quite emotive and quite sensitive, which is the termination of the employment relationship. And with us is a legal expert on employment matters and also a colleague in the profession. I will let him introduce himself.
Thank you very much, Sian, and hello, viewers. My name is Isaac Kiche. I am an advocate of the High Court of Kenya with the practical experience of 7 years. I'm an arbitrator as well as a mediator. Above that, I'm a senior associate at the firm of Triple OK Law Advocates, which is based here in Nairobi, and has a practical experience of more than 17 years in resolving disputes. So thank you very much.
Karibu sana. Now, just please explain to the viewers what is termination.
Thank you. As you mentioned, termination, the term itself, it's a motive. And in essence, it just means bringing it to an end. The relationship between the employer and the employee. So that action of bringing it to an end is what essentially is termination.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, in the employment relationship, who can terminate? Is it the employer? Is it the employee? Is it both of them?
Thank you for the question. The law allows either party to terminate or bring it to an end. So an employee, if is dissatisfied with the manner of the terms of services, or maybe wants to change the environment, is allowed to resign.
Mm-hmm.
That's a way of bringing it to an end. He can also just give a notice and say, I no longer want to work, and you'll just exit. Similarly, the employer is also allowed to terminate. So you'll find in most of the employment contracts, or even if there is an oral contract, the law allows the employer to just give a notice to say, we will end after this period of time. It depends on what you agree on. But the basic, the bare minimum usually is 28 days or 1 month. Yeah, notice. And that is efficient.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, for when termination has been started by an employee, are there grounds that the employee has to give, or the employee can just say, you know what, this is the end of the journey for us? And the same way, when it's an employer, are there specific grounds that an employer can end or terminate an employee?
Thank you. Actually, that question is very important because it's one of those areas that the courts have grappled with, and even the employer, the employee, on really what are the essentials in this termination? What is the process itself? So if an employee wants to bring it to an end, the law actually makes it very easier for the employee.
Okay.
You can even just do a one-line resignation.
It's been real.
Yeah, and you go.
Mm-hmm.
There's really no hurdles that are placed before the employee when he or she wants to leave employment. So that's really one of those key areas that we can celebrate about the Employment Act, in a way of trying to just make it easier for the employee to exit.
Okay.
But when it comes to the employer, there are legal hurdles. There are things that the employer has to do. Now, one of them is that before you terminate, you have to go back to the contract. What does it say about termination? Especially on the notice. How long should you give before you bring it to an end? So if it is 1 month, you need to give that 1 month notice. And if you don't do it, then you'll be faulted for that. So secondly, then you need to give a reason. And it's not just a reason. It has to be a valid reason. So the things that the employer needs to think about when it comes to termination is that in the entire process, there are two things. Number one, you give a valid and a fair reason. Secondly, you have to do it, that process has to be fair. It has to be seen to be fair. So those two ingredients are very key when the employer wants to terminate. And what the employer actually needs to think about, because at the back of the mind of the court, what the court needs to see is that whatever you did, was it something that a reasonable employer would do in the circumstances? So sometimes you see that there's a lot of restrictions, or the employer is put into a process that more or less looks like a criminal process. That should not happen, because the law recognizes that the relationship between an employer and employee, it's not of a criminal nature. There's some cordial relationship that exists before this termination. So when the termination sets in, then what is required is that you be fair, you be reasonable. And the reasons you are giving to terminate should relate to how this employee performed, how he did not perform, so that you don't bring things which are outside the contract. Yeah, so really those are the main areas that an employer should think about when he or she or it wants to terminate a contract.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now you mentioned a termination notice, and you said that either party, either the employee or the employer, can give a termination notice.
Yes.
So can you just take us through the basic content of this termination notice?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So thank you. So if you want to give this notice, of course, one of the essentials is just to remember how long. How long should you give it?
Okay.
So on the part of the employee or on the employer, you'll be guided by the contract to say if it is 1 month, it is 3 months, 2 months. So you give that period.
Mm-hmm.
But there are instances when you may not have that time.
Okay.
You may not have the time to give that notice.
Mm-hmm.
So the law still allows you, but places some restrictions to it.
Mm-hmm.
So if, let's say, for instance, you are supposed to give me 1 month notice,
Mm-hmm.
but because of the operations of the business, you want me out during this month. So then you'll be required to pay me instead of giving the notice. So if it was 1 month notice, then you pay me 1 month salary. Then that actually brings it to an end. So there's really no first hand or what would say a template of a termination notice.
Okay.
But the key ingredient is to remember how long should you give it. And for the employer, it is also important that as you give the notice, you also mention the amounts that you'll pay the employee upon that when it ends, so that they're aware of it. In the event there's a dispute, then that can be addressed during that point. Yeah.
Okay. So now in these times of the COVID pandemic, some businesses have been unable to sustain their workforce.
That's true.
And most of them have had to let them go.
Yeah.
Now, how would, just in general, how would you let them go through it? How would you advise them to go through termination?
Yes, thank you. And of course, it is even in the public domain. COVID has had a serious impact on businesses, which has necessitated the employers to think of ways of managing their businesses. So, of course, the employees have been impacted as well. So, there are instances like when your contract of employment can be brought to an end, not because of something that you did, but because of things which are beyond you, for instance, COVID.
Yeah.
So in those cases, the law also makes available the remedies or the options that an employer can pursue. So one of them is the redundancy.
Okay.
So it is an involuntary termination of your contract because it's not what you did.
Sure.
So in that case, what the employer needs to do, one, you need to notify the employee. And if this employee is in a union, then you also need to notify the union. At the same time, you also notify the labor officer in that area. So it is normally a 1 month notice telling them we intend to declare these employees redundant for 1, 2, 3 reasons.
Okay.
Then as you do that, because the employment, the termination itself, as we had mentioned, is emotive, and there are things that come with it.
Sure.
Because you can find the employee at other commitments elsewhere, and the possibility of getting an employment can also be a problem.
Yes.
So you need to take these employees through a counseling session, just to give them the picture of what awaits them the other side and the reason why you are doing this. So that gives them some sense of comfort even as they leave the employment.
Sure.
So that's one of the things that you'll need to do. And so then there are also the aspects of how much will you pay them. There has to be an exit package.
Okay.
So the law has tried to give the basic minimum. There's the severance pay, which normally is they pay for 15 days for the years that you've worked. And of course, the notice period also will need to be paid. So it's the redundancy process, of course, it's a bit complex. But if it is well designed, the courts will uphold it, bearing in mind that the situation itself, it's not something that was within the control of either the employer or the employee. Yeah. So what is important is try as much as possible to be fair, and that's really the most important thing is to be fair.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, viewers. If you run a business and your workforce is no longer sustainable, or if you need to let go of some people, now you understand how to go through a termination process. Also, if you're employed and your employer has told you, you cannot work here anymore, now you're able to gauge, did I go through a fair process? Mr. Kiche, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
How can the viewers reach you if they have any questions regarding this topic today?
Thank you, viewers. I can be reached through my work email, which is ikiche@OOKLaw. I'm also available on the various social media platforms. On Twitter, you can follow me at Isaac Kiche, as well as on LinkedIn, same way, Isaac Kiche. Beyond that, even my details are also on the OOKLaw website. So you just log in and you'll find all the necessary ways to get in touch with me. So thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Kiche, for joining us. We have learned a lot. Thank you, viewers, for tuning in, for listening. If you like this video, subscribe and share with your family, with your friends, even with your employer when you want to say, that process you put me through is not fair. Yeah. And we'd also like to thank Chigiti and Chigiti Advocates for facilitating the shooting of this series, to Mushiri Frames, who's our videography crew, for the camera work and the editing. See you next time. Bye-bye.